How many of you are familiar, have heard of, have worked with a business model canvas before? Oh, everybody. Well, okay, we can just stop right now and just ask a bunch of questions, all right? So working with business model canvas is really working with a tool. And working with a tool, we get better at it the more we use it. And that's one of the reasons why I do like this, this tool for business. It really helps you keep on game, on agenda. One of the best things about it is there are no numbers on it. And we often get very, very tied down to numbers and trying to figure out how big is my market, what percentage of that $2 billion market I'm going to get, et cetera. On this one, there's no numbers. The second thing I like about it is there's no technology. I know many of you are probably technology entrepreneurs and love to talk about the technology. This forces you to actually think about your business. And what it really does is it focuses on value. And I know Dave touched on value in his last presentation. So we're going to talk about why we need a business model canvas. Go through the mechanics of creating it. But also very importantly, I think for Mike's presentation later on, is how you can use the business model canvas to actually tell your story. It's a great template to create a more written business plan. It's a great template to actually talk about it in front of investors and create some excitement because you're not talking numbers. You can actually use it to talk about emotion and why people want to buy your product and why you have structured your business in such a way to really excel. So first of all, what is a business model? It is not a financial pro forma. In fact, I would venture to say you can't even develop a financial pro forma for your business unless you've created a business model canvas for which to guide you through the development of your spreadsheets. It is a way of describing the rationale of how you're actually going to organize to create, your organization is going to create, deliver, right, and capture or extract some value for the owners and shareholders. Hence, it's very interesting to investors who might be you as the founder, as well as other people who might be co-investing with you. So for those of you who haven't got it, this is what the front page of the front of the book looks like by Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. It's been around now for probably about 10 years, I think. It's widely used in startups, widely used in very, very large corporations as they pick apart their business and try to dissect how to innovate and grow their business. All right? It's the best $20 that you will spend. You will use it repeatedly, ongoing, every day. You should be using it every day anyway, and certainly on a quarterly basis. So as my bio said, if you looked at the overall curriculum here, I coach CEOs who are in the technology field that are looking to scale their growth. I get them to do this for their individual product lines. We review this every 90 days to find ways to innovate and grow and drive more value in the business. So it's not a tool that you do once when you start up. It's actually a tool that you will continue to use as you grow your business, as you innovate. So let's get into it. First of all, see if I can make a video work here. That's linked. Just right on the canvas.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
Okay, so I couldn't possibly describe it that quickly with such a sexy English accent as that. So I figured I'd better enlighten you a little bit and wake you up a little bit this morning. But it very concisely describes the 9 building blocks and what they are. Let's dig into them a little bit more detail. And in fact, let's do an example right now. I think Dave touched on the iPod and gave you a positioning statement for the iPod. So let's talk about the iPod business. There you go. So what was it that they were after, right? The positioning statement said, we're trying to create a seamless music experience, right? And because we were mucking around with, well, in those days we had discs and we had probably LP records, and we were trying to put them onto our computers. Our computers are just getting good with digital. And capturing digital audio and being able to display and perform or produce digital audio. And Apple had this idea, how can we do this better? So they were going after predominantly the mass market, at least eventually. I know Dave identified that initially it was that high-value customer for a very specific reason, and your target entry point is often very different than your mass market. But what else were they trying to do? Well, how did they get to that market? They had to get it through stores, which came actually later. But they initially did it through the web, right? You could distribute. They created iTunes, right, in order to be able to buy material. They created partnerships or electronic stores where you could buy your iPod, or through the internet you could buy your iPod. And those were their channels to market. They actually went more indirect, other than iTunes, more indirect initially, and then eventually brought out the Apple stores. What were the relationships like? Well, anybody who were, if you were in at the beginning of the iTunes market, recognize that there were some substantial switching costs. If you bought through the iTunes stores, your product, your music was digitally tagged to your PC. You couldn't actually take it and move it anywhere else. You couldn't share it. You couldn't put it on any, it was on that machine and that machine only and that iPod only. And they created significant barriers to moving to other places. And in fact, if Steve Jobs had had his way, you would never have been able to use iTunes on a personal computer. The iTunes probably would have been a flop because he was insistent, adamant. He was apoplectic about the fact that his team wanted to actually make iTunes available not only on Apple products, which were only 3% of the market at that point in time, but also make them available on PC-based products, which were 97% of the product. Fortunately, the rest of the team prevailed, and Steve Jobs almost committed hara-kiri. But that's Steve Jobs. So what else? They have a brand. They had a brand that was known, I would say, in the upper end of the market, of the market. The Love Mark, the apple with the chunk out of it. It had become known, and if you recall the early advertisements for the iPod, that Love Mark was very, very prominent. And all you saw was a silhouette of a person in a colored iPod with the apple on it. So very, very focused on the brand image and the brand creation. Very clean, very modern, very hip. And so that was part of creating the relationship with the customers, immediately a recognizable product and brand. They had to create partnerships, obviously, with people who had the content. Apple had no content. So they had to buy or create the contracts that allowed them to distribute the music, because in some ways their competition in distribution of music was against all those people who were pressing CDs at the time or DVDs at the time. And so Apple went quite a ways, before they actually launched the product, went quite a ways in signing up different record companies in order to make sure that they had the rights and had enough content to make it worthwhile for their customers to buy their product. Obviously, as you've seen with Apple, they're not a manufacturer. They're a designer, but they're not a manufacturer at all. And everything that they sell is a product which is made somewhere else, made by an OEM, made by a manufacturer who has the skills, the abilities to produce these at low cost. So what were the key resources? Well, certainly they had to have the content agreements. Like that's why sell a product if you actually can't get, particularly when can't get content for it, particularly when it's all locked in, if it had a very limited amount. And one of the serious limitations, if you recall, initially at getting content agreements was there was no music from the Beatles. Anybody remember why? Exactly, it was Apple Records, and they were in a trademark dispute between Apple the computers and Apple the records. And it wasn't until they settled the trademark dispute that Apple the records, or in other words, I guess it was owned by Michael Jackson at that point in time, I think, actually agreed to license their content through the iTunes Store. So what else did we have? Well, they had iPod hardware design, and they had iTunes software, which allowed this seamless music experience to occur. There are the key resources. So as they continued to, and then of course the brand, as they continued to grow, hardware design and innovation in design, clearly expanding of capacity and whatnot was critical. Marketing was absolutely critical. Because they had to promote the Love Mark, the brand image, the experience, right? All of that came out of very, very effective marketing and understanding how the product felt to their clients, not how it worked, how it felt. And that included how it worked, but gave a person a much cooler image than walking around with clunky Discmans or Diamond Rios or whatever the other alternatives were in the marketplace. So they clearly revolutionized. Their cost structure was people, obviously, marketing expenses, and the unit costs of the iPod coming in, which, I think Dave said they sold them initially for about $600 or $700. At that time, it seemed like a pretty good deal for anybody who was quite an audiophile. And so what were their revenue streams like? Now, this is kind of interesting. They had some revenue from the music that they sold. If you recall, you could actually buy one song. You didn't have to buy a whole album. And if you only bought one song, they probably didn't make any money and maybe even lost money by the time they went through the credit card fees, and they were only making about 20 cents or something like that on a per track on a large CD. So they got a little bit of money through that. They made a huge amount of money on their hardware. And even today, Apple's business model has been based on very, very high revenue, high margin from their products. And in the iPhone market, for example, iPhones are about a little more than 15%, maybe, I don't know, it fluctuates, but somewhere around 15, 16% of the total number of smartphones on the market. Apple commands more than 50% of the margin that is generated from smartphone sales in the world. Right? So that's very high, they charge a premium product. They have very low costs because of the way they've designed and built them. They mass market, and have you ever seen an iPhone or an iPod for sale discounted at a retailer? I've never seen one discounted. They come out with a new version, but even once they come out with a new version, I haven't seen the other ones discounted. I've seen them bundled into a telecom offering, but I've never actually seen a discount. You won't see Apple products on sale. Okay? So that's Apple. That's how we create a business model canvas. In fact, you start out with it much simpler than that because that's more of an evolved business. And let's look at what we would do for ourselves, starting with customer segments. Segmentation is probably one of the things that I see as being the biggest challenge, the things that are not done particularly well with early stage companies. And it's absolutely critical for you to start your business and understand the segments that you're going to be working in. Even Facebook, if you think of Facebook starting out, they did not start out and just sort of say, I'm going to produce this social media thing. They started out with some text messaging going back amongst a class at Harvard. In fact, I think it was only the males in the class. That was the initial market segment that they worked on. It then became people at Harvard. It then became Ivy League schools. It then became, you actually, in order to be on Facebook, you actually had to register with an email address that was part of an educational institution, right? And so it went through all of these different iterations, going through early stage customer segments, maybe only just testing their products, certainly weren't profitable, but gradually expanding out until finally it became one which was, targeting customers who are enterprises who are trying to create a Facebook image and create a social presence. So the segmentation that you're doing at this stage is critical to defining who the really essential customers are that you're going to start out with. So in your market, in your business model canvas here, clearly articulate the different customer segments. I know in the Apple one we talked about mass market, but you as a startup need to be thinking about not just mass market. What is it? Where are they? What is their situation that is going to be make them prone or want to buy you and want to use your product? So some of the key criteria that we need to look at is the specificity. How specific are you? How clearly are you focused on a customer? And that's going to be critical to your investors as well. They're going to want to be able to touch and see and understand and know exactly who your customers will be in the early stages, and then how will your market evolve into subsequent market segments. So some reminders or some checks, I guess, that you can use to look at your segments to understand whether or not. First is, do they all have the same need? Do they all have the same problem? that you're trying to solve. But more than that, do they reference each other? So I could have some whiz-bang technology or software to help people who are planning roads or planning right-of-ways that helps me with geospatial data. And people in the utilities, telecom, electrical distribution, gas, municipalities, all have the same need for that information. But do they really reference each other? Does the guy who's in telecom look at a guy who's in oil and gas and say, that guy deals in muck and pipes and all that sort of stuff. I don't do that. I've got this clean, high technology. So they don't reference those people. And you need to make sure that the people are talking to each other. Why? It will substantially drive down your business development costs, your marketing, selling, and support costs. All right? Keep and get yourself into a market segment so that each person in that segment reference each other. I mean, that's why Facebook is so successful selling, because when you like something, you're referencing that item on Facebook. So Facebook has a natural marketing program inside its platform, right? So who are they checking? So in the social context, I am checking, or I'll call it the consumer context, I'm checking with my friends to see whether or not they have things. Maybe I'm trying to keep up with my next door neighbors because they've bought something. In the enterprise context, it's who is that person competing with? And if I'm making this guy more competitive, then I probably want to make that guy more competitive, or he probably wants me to make him more competitive, right? So it's who are they really looking at as alternates in the marketplace that is going to eat their lunch. Check to see whether they're buying at the same price, the same package, the same quantity, right? And through the same channels of distribution. Somebody who's buying directly on an enterprise, as we say, belly-to-belly sales, is not the same customer who is buying through a distribution channel and getting it through a store or a third party. It's not the same market segment. And if you understand the segmentation, you can really drive more and more value as you expand your business. So the value proposition, something that is absolutely critical. And the value proposition that I really want you to think about is make sure that you have fallen in love with the problem, not your solution. Okay? Because it's the problem that is the source of your income. It's the problem that the customer wants to get solved. They don't want to buy your product. They want to solve a problem. And if you fall in love with the problem, you will orient your solution to help that customer and win his business. All right? So in your value proposition, make sure that you clearly put your problem up front and understand how you are serving him, all aspects of it. So understand all the elements of value, not just the dollar saving, because the dollar saving and the rational reason why they're buying is part of it. But you've got to understand the hook that you've got in there. What's the emotional reason that somebody is buying your product now? And typically in enterprise sales, we find that you are only, you're going to talk and talk and talk and talk with a client and never close the business unless there is that emotional bang that says, I've got to buy it now. They've got a regulatory issue, they've got a competitive issue. For whatever reason, they need to buy it now. They're ready to buy. Okay, so the more wow, the better. So Dave talked about the value proposition, so I'm not going to emphasize it. He talked about 6 sentences. I'm going to say it's actually 2 sentences and 6 lines. So the first sentence is, you are positioning the value of the offering, right? what is the value of the offering? This is actually more of a generic statement so that your business comes up beside your competitors on Google search. Because you are a startup, you do not have a brand image or brand awareness. Nobody trusts you at this point in time. So you better make sure that you appear alongside so they actually understand what you do. The second statement is about positioning your differentiation, and that's where your wow is. Right? You want somebody to read that and say, wow, I better go talk to those people because they're really going to get it for me. Okay. How are you reaching the customers? So you've got customer segments, you've got a great value proposition. Okay, how am I actually going to make the sale? Right? What are the vehicles that I'm going to use? How can I get to them efficiently? Are they spending tons of money, in which case, and they really need a personal hand-holding approach? Right? Or are they spending a little bit of money and I need a really efficient way to get out there and reach them? So these are the challenges that you've got to articulate specifically for the segment. Okay? Think about how they're integrating. All of these questions are ways that you want to challenge your approach to the market, each segment, to find more efficient ways of getting there and possibly better ways to serve them. In other words, maybe they don't like buying through a website. Maybe they do want to have a personal approach. Maybe there's actually opportunity and value in the way that you're selling that can add value to your business. Starting out, you want to make sure that you are keeping your life simple. That's why I'm suggesting choose one segment, one approach to market that gets you going and gets you into the marketplace. The other element of simplicity as a startup is proximity to the customer. As you're starting up, you are obviously going to iterate. I don't know anybody who gets it right the first time. I think the only person I know who got it right the first time was one who came out with the pet rock, right? And they sold you a pet rock. And didn't have to change the rock too many times. But you've got to make sure that you are learning from the customer from the get-go. As soon as you make the first sale, in fact, as soon as you have the first customer discovery conversation, you are trying to understand what it is, what is their current context, how are they buying, how are they going to use it, etc. And so as you get into the marketplace, keep your life simple, keep on a single channel, and if the economics of your business allow it, sell it to them directly. Either, as we say, a belly-to-belly sale, where you go knock on their door and have a conversation and try to close the deal, or through your website where the business is coming directly to your own website where you can control the messaging into the website. The second thing is how are you going to sell through a channel partner if you don't understand the actual value proposition of the user, of the customer? You can't explain why to the channel partner. You can't effectively explain why and how the customer is going to use it unless you've been there. So as you're thinking of your channels, think of all the stages of the selling process, because you go through a sequence in winning the business and supporting the sale and delivering the product, right? And you may go through, start out using some direct, but when it comes down to the actual delivery or fulfillment, as we say, of the business, maybe it has to be done by somebody else because you physically don't have the sales force or the technical resource support that's out there to be able to fulfill it. So think as you're going through, you're thinking about your channels, make sure you're thinking of the channels at each of the different stages and have a strategy as to how you're going to build awareness, how you're going to allow them to evaluate your product, how are you going to close the sale, how are you going to support them after they've done it, and how are you going to sell more to them afterwards. So the fourth bullet is your customer relationships. Recall in Apple it talked about the love mark, and clearly we have to ensure that these are tight and close. You understand, and you have developed different ways of supporting different customers in different segments that have different needs, right? So it isn't a one-size-fits-all. It really never is. And the better you are at understanding what the different groupings are and how you can better serve those, the better off and tighter your relationships will be. Customer relationships are the source of your growth. It costs you 7 times more for every dollar that you gain in selling to an existing customer. To get to a new customer, it will cost you 7 times as much dollars, right? Far easier to sell, in other words, deepen your relationship by selling more products, more value to an existing customer than it is to go out and continually find new customers. The new customer development process is expensive, all right? So this is a key area where you can drive value in your business by loving your customers, making sure that you have an ongoing, limited amount of churn, as we say in anything that's a subscription type of business. There's always a natural element because businesses go out of business and people die or disappear or move away, whatever. But how is it that you can make sure that you get very, very high promotional score from each customer that you have? The 5th element is your revenue streams. So there are lots of different ways that you can receive revenue from your customers. How do your customers want to pay for it? How is it that they are deriving value from the use of your product or the use of your service? And how can you price it so that it aligns with the value that they are receiving? Then those are types of things that help to minimize churn. On your business, to strengthen your business model, and what Mike Volker wants to see is really predictable revenue. It's going to be there today, tomorrow, next 3 years, next 5 years, and keep on growing. And then if you've got the traction, minimal amount of churn, that's great. So you've got to dig in, and again, it comes back to the value of your proposition and the value of those customer relationships that you have created. Lots of different ways. So again, I promised you that on the business model canvas, there are no numbers. We're just talking about structure here, right? You put numbers in if you want. I choose not to because I'm really trying to do some certain things here. One is make sure that I'm focused on aligning how my customers are paying with the value that they're receiving, one. And the second, I'm trying to align my revenue streams and my costs to minimize the risk in the business. The 6th key element is my key activities. What are the things that are absolutely essential for my business to do? That's the business, not my partners, in other words. What is it that's essential for me to do to produce the value in the value proposition, to deliver or reach the customers, and then to support the customers? So value proposition, channels, and my customer relationships. So here, we're really trying to create some uniqueness. How is it that we can have something that somebody else can't copy? How is it that we can keep it to our own secret sauce? This is where some IP actually, in terms of business processes, actually exists. And if you can do things better and keep others from trying to mimic you, you have a leg up. What are your key resources? What are the key assets that you have to have in your business in terms of algorithms, in terms of bricks and mortar, in terms of websites, software code, maybe patents, particularly if you're in the drug world, you need to probably have to have some patents that are sources of strength, that are sources of resources that you can leverage into creating that value for the customer. Here, obviously, the fewer the better. The more leverage that you can get out of your $1 million of investment, the better, right? What are the key partners? The partners here are not substitutes for customers. Partners are the people that are going to actually give you some, hopefully give you some more credibility as a startup in order to grow your business, give you credibility in the marketplace with authorities, with associations, with your customer groups. Who are the suppliers that are going to be essential to you moving forward so that they can provide something so that you don't have to waste your resources on it yourself? I mean, just think of what Apple did, right? Everybody else certainly in the music device game, the Sonys and Diamond Rios and whatnot, they manufactured all their own stuff. Even in the computer business, everybody kind of manufactured their own stuff. What did Apple do? Said, no, that's not our game. We'll write the software, we'll market it, we're going to give it all the design image, but we can find people who are experts in the manufacturing. We don't need to be a semiconductor manufacturer, right? So take a page out of their book. What is it that you can outsource? How can you change and become more nimble in your business model, in your business by having a business model which perhaps leverages some other resources that are out there that might be good or better? And truly, you have to ask yourself the question, for every activity that you're doing, is it better that you do it? In other words, is it unique to you? Is there some place that you can gain or have competitive advantage? Or is it better that you actually find it from somebody else? Right? Why invest in doing something that has limited amount of added value that you are putting into the marketplace or into your company? And the last key one is the cost structure. So here, we got to think like an accountant, and we're looking at trying to control them, right? How is it that we can control them, minimize them, and have them aligned with the revenue streams that we come in? Because when we have a whack of costs going in and a little bit of revenue that's coming into us in a long way in the future, that's a big risk. So I'm sure Mike is going to be looking for things that minimize the amount of capital going in or cost going in up front, right? And having your revenue grow, and as your revenue grows, yeah, you can add some cost into the business. So where is it that you can drive economies of scope? By selling more to the same customer, of scale, by being able to use the same platform across different customer segments, et cetera. So you're starting out, and what you've done is you've created this canvas. You're not in business yet. Maybe you've done a little bit, but you really don't know. And it's all a guess. It's all a guess, right? It's a hypothesis. So you need to test each one of these elements, of these 9 elements in the marketplace. Some of them are going to be more obvious than others. Some are going to be more important than others. I suggest the first one you really have to validate is the problem that you're solving. Have you actually validated the customer sees the problem the way you see it? And if you've then validated it, does your solution provide value to them? Then start digging into them and about how they want to buy from you, how they want to be supported from you. Right? Then you can start working on the hypothesis of how you're actually going to build your business. So, as I alluded to, one side is focused on customers, the market. The other side is focused on an internal or building up your business, the internal mechanisms that you're going to use and create inside your business to deliver value to the marketplace. So we talk about the right side of the business model canvas being value creation to the marketplace, and the left side being a cost or efficiency element, which is where you're gaining efficiencies, agility on how you operate internally. Right? It's internal focused. So when you're thinking about driving value, I don't know if you've come across what's called the Kano model of the different elements of features. But here we have some basic features which are referred to as threshold attributes. These are the things that kind of just get you into the game, get you into the party, or they're called table stakes, right? There's not really a differentiated value. If you don't have this, right? If you're selling bicycles and you don't have 2 wheels, then you're not in the game, right? The second one is the performance attributes. The more you use it, right, the more benefit that the customer gets from it. So, your performance curve or your line here may be greater than your competitors, right? But it is something which goes with more utility. The more you use it, the greater gain that you get. And the last one is the excitement attributes. And those ones are the ones that absolutely delight the customers and drive engagement of your product. Whether that's software, whether it's a hardware product, it doesn't matter. It's something that goes beyond what the experience that the customer expected. And that's probably where a lot of Apple products were successful initially, because the touch, the feel of it, people weren't used to it. They were used to the traditional hunt and peck on a computer, or if you're talking about music, the other music products that were around. And so these things really drove the engagement and the success, the stickiness of the product. And when you're looking at these different elements of how attributes of your service can change, these can be found all the way through that right side of your business model. It can be in your business and your value proposition. It can be the way in which you are approaching and selling to your customers. It can be in the customer relationship component of your business model. So look for ways of driving engagement and driving greater value with use on each of those 3: channels, relationships, and of course, on your value proposition. So that's building your business model, business model using the canvas. And it's certainly a way of effectively analyzing your business and constructing your business. But it's also a very effective way of telling your story. And when you're telling the story, as was described in the video, and pretty much the same way I've gone through the business of describing it here, I start with customer segments. And when I'm talking about telling a story, I can be telling a story certainly to my investors, right? They want to know, okay, what have you got here? It's a great market out there, et cetera. But how are you actually going to execute? How are you going to construct your business in order to deliver that value to the marketplace? And so using the canvas can be a great way to tell that story. I think of it actually as a template for a written business plan, because we start out with the market and we move back to the operations as we go through it. The second thing is very critical, is conveying it to other employees and partners that you have in the business. You need, as a CEO or founder, you need to be able to communicate effectively what it is you are doing. You got to keep people on the same page with you. And your business is going to evolve. This canvas is going to evolve as you, from startup through to $5, $10, $50 million, you're going to evolve it. First of all, there's going to be a lot more products. It's going to get more complex, and you've got to be able to describe the different things that you're doing. So how can we use it to tell a story? Well, first of all, we start with the customer segments, and then we talk about what problem we're solving and how we're solving it with our value proposition. Then we move to, okay, here's how I'm actually going to reach these customers that have this problem, and how am I going to now support them? Right? I can relate how I'm going to deliver the value in the marketplace. And for all of that, they're going to pay me this amount of, in this manner, to support this type of a value. Once I'm done with the value side, I can now talk about the key activities that I'm going to undertake in order to deliver this value into the marketplace, because I've provided an entire context with which to talk about the activities that my business has to organize. All right? Now that I've discussed the activities, it implies that I need some resources in order to execute those activities. So do I have bricks and mortar? Do I have software? Do I have IP that I've used, et cetera? What are the key resources that are underlying, are going to be used by the team that are conducting these activities? So some things I decide, as we talked about Apple, I don't need to do. I don't need to be a manufacturer, so I can outsource that, right? So what is it that you can find from external people in order to put some extra wind under your wings, so to speak? Who are the associations that might be influencing the buying decisions out in the marketplace? What are the associations that you should be members in? Okay, those are the types of key partners that you need to have. And then lastly, what is your cost structure? Right? Can only describe your cost structure once you've talked about all the other elements of your business. So this is a very effective way of quickly telling the story. And to illustrate, I'll tell you my business story, right? So first of all, my focus is on owners of technology companies that have about $5 to $20 million in revenue, are really stuck growing. They can't get growth because they've never been in a big organization and been able to find a way to scale the business, learned how to scale up a business, right? They also tend to be located in BC and Alberta. That's just out of convenience, so I don't have to, travel too far. Done enough of that. My value proposition to them is that I actually unstuck their business because I can provide and enable sustainable growth through a proven scale-up framework or process or system with some ongoing hands-on coaching from me directly to the CEO and to some of their team. And I reach those people, I do my selling or grow my business by direct sales, person to person. I do that for a reason, because I want to make sure there's a compatibility of personality between me and my client. And I also have referrals from past clients, from other colleagues and people in the business. And I do presentations like this and other places talking about some of the tools of the trade that we have in coaching. So I support my clients with a personal, hands-on, around the table, personal coaching service. They can cry on my shoulder if they're totally frustrated. They can tell me their secrets about who they fear in the organization, who they think is not performing, and I'm never going to tell them exactly what to do. I'm going to try to ask them some serious questions to help them come to the decision themselves. I'll provide team training so that if they need skill development amongst their team to up their game, we'll do that. And then I provide and keep a reference library so that I can ensure that I'm giving them tools and giving them education and other third-party references that they can seek, so that it's not confidential to me. And my revenue streams, well, I charge a retainer on a fixed dollar per month, and I also do on-site workshops so that if I have to commit to a client for an entire day, he blocks out my time and it's with their team. So my key activities are client engagement, direct client engagement, very personalized, right? I facilitate the meetings, management meetings and things like that to help them through it. And I make sure that they are receiving best practices. In terms of the resources, my experience helps from the fact that I've gone through 4 startups, 4 turnarounds, all of it's been in the technology world, and putting that into the context of how to use the tools really seems to help the CEOs. I also engage or use computer web conferencing extensively so I don't have to travel and spend a lot of time traveling. And that way my clients get much faster and ready access to me to consult on specific issues, or for that matter, their management teams. So I have a number of key partners, AceTech being one of them, which is the CEOs helping CEOs, community of technology CEOs here in Vancouver, based here in Vancouver. The BCIC, the Innovation Council, over which I'm an EIR and specifically at Foresight. I also act in the as an angel investor through Open Angel and and the Vantech Entrepreneurs Network, and the Association for Corporate Growth, ACG. My cost structure clearly is my own salary on a cost per month basis, as well as my education costs in order to keep current, and then of course I have some legal and accounting in order to organize. So quickly, that is, I'm going to say, what my business is all about, and I can quickly describe. Hopefully that gives you a reasonable perspective of how to describe your business. I'm not trying to excite you about my business because I'm not seeking outside investment right now, but if you were, clearly you might focus on some of the key uniqueness of your business in order to drive that point home for your investors. Or, for that matter, your employees, who you want to encourage that they keep that confidential, that they understand that they have to focus on that in order to nurture it and make it better for clients. So there's a couple of different patterns that we have out here in business models. One of them is being the multi-sided platform, which is Google's model. So let's take a look at what Google looks like, right? They start out by having free stuff, right? They've got free and easy search, right? Great algorithms, that's why they've won. And it helps people who are looking for stuff. And then they have other people. You can't survive on free, so you've got to find somebody to pay the freight. So they have very, very efficient targeted advertising using their AdWords, for which they auction, keyword auctions all the time. And those are for businesses that are trying to find stuff. That are selling stuff, trying to find clients. Right? So Google knows who's looking for what, so they can provide good insights as to where things should be going. And they have these other clients who are looking for people who are looking for that type of information. They also have people that are out there distributing content. You think of the people who are newspapers and media and things like that have content. And Google is actually helping them monetize content. And monetizing, why are they doing that for free? Well, sometimes they take a cut. Sometimes it's free. Like if I'm not monetizing it. Sorry. If it's free, then they're not being monetized. But CBC, for example, isn't selling services, but I can go on there. But they can see what I'm looking for, right? So they're learning what I'm searching for, both in terms of news as well as terms of products, etc. It's uncanny how they follow me. They seem to know where I've been on vacation, and unbelievable. Scary. So where are their costs, right? Well, they're all focused on the platform. The platform, the algorithms, is absolutely critical, their infrastructure that they have there. And the challenge is, how can I attract, as a multi-sided platform, obviously Google's already there in terms of getting 70% of the search world, but if you're starting a multi-sided platform and have this vision of having some free users and matching two people together, two groups together, two customer segments together, how is it that I can make my business survive? Well, the question is, how can I attract enough users in order to interest the people who are willing to pay? Right? So there are lots of other examples, Uber, Airbnb, Expedia, even newspapers, I would argue, are the original multi-sided platform. I know you also paid for a newspaper. You may have had a subscription to it. It probably didn't pay the cost. It probably didn't even pay enough to provide the delivery service. But you need very strong network effects, and ergo, you have to have a very well-defined community where there's a lot of mutual benefit from the different users that are in that group. So anybody that's starting out on some sort of a digital media platform probably has visions of free as a business model as well. So Flickr is an example of that, where you have a bunch of free users, right? So they're getting basic service for free. You can post your photos up there. You can share them with your friends. Very, very limited amount of things that you can do with it. Getting probably crunched a little bit these days by things like Facebook and whatnot. But then they have the high value customers that need to do some exchange. Professional photographers that are trying to sell their photos and things like that. So it provides a medium for that to occur, and they charge a full price. There's other examples. If you're in the software, some things, CRM systems are free for the very limited use, single use, SOHO use, and then as soon as you add a multiple and become more of a business, bingo, you have to pay to have multiple users on the same platform accessing the same database. So their costs, or their rest of their model is fairly traditional. They've got created some mass customized switching costs in their relationships. They are owned by Yahoo, so there's a relationship with Yahoo, and clearly their platform and platform management are key activities and key resources that they need to leverage, right? The main question, how is it that I can create an effective paywall that's going to pay for my overall costs and not scare away the high value customers? How is it that I can tune the way that people are paying so that I extract the value, enough value that I can live and survive? So some other examples of this would be Red Hat, who's in the open source software world, Hootsuite, and the original developer of this would have been Gillette with their razor, giving away the free razor. In turn, I now have to buy the razor blades, right? Currently being challenged by Harry's and a few others, interestingly enough. So as I mentioned, this is a tool you can use month after month, year after year, in terms of building this and strengthening your business. You need to continuously look to improve value. And so in doing that, you're looking externally to how can I better serve my customers. Keep in mind, the market is not static. So your value to customers has to evolve as the needs of your customers evolve, right? Maybe just as simple as you're doing software and there's a new version of iOS or a new version of Windows that comes out, and you've got to keep that up to date, right? All of a sudden, your product doesn't work so well with it. And the second one, of course, is internally, is how can I do things better internally? How can I become better at the activities and having those activities align with my value proposition, my customer support and relationship model, and my selling and distribution model, okay? So those are things that you want to keep coming back at and doing SWOT analysis on actually each and every one of these components. And if you go back to the book by Osterwalder and Pineur, they give you a whole series of questions to do a SWOT analysis on each one of these components through the book. More important after you've obviously validated and are in business, but this is what I use, again, in coaching and going through quarterly or annual strategic planning sessions with my clients, because we can get back and we can actually stand back and work on the business as opposed to work in the business, thinking about how is it we could change this? What is the different nuance that we can do? What could we add in our relationship model that would delight our customers a lot more? Okay. So using the business model canvas as a tool, first and foremost, as a startup, is critical for you to help tell your story. It's telling your story about how you're actually creating value in the marketplace for clients. It's telling them how you're actually enabling through the construct of your business, what activities you're doing, what resources you have, what partnerships you have, how you're going to deliver value to the marketplace. And then from an investor perspective, it'll give them an idea of how you're actually going to capture some value for shareholders by the difference, obviously, between the value coming in from the marketplace to your cost that you have of delivering that value. it defines the ultimate structure that you need in your pro forma, in your financial pro forma. It's an essential step to be done before you actually go hard to work on your pro forma. You know, yes, you want to do some work on the pro forma and say, what does the market look like? What does the big picture look like, right? But you can't actually structure how you're selling, how you're supporting customers, unless you actually have done this work and defined what it is that your business model looks like. Use it to do SWOT analysis. Every 90 days is probably a great tool. And if you're in the startup mode, you're still doing a hypothesis. So how quickly are you going through and determining, making those hypotheses change from hypothesis to fact by validating the different components of your business model? And lastly, it is a source of innovation. Just by the example of how Apple came out of business, which was basically a music distribution business. And they came at it and designed a totally different way of distributing music to consumers. You can do the same thing too. So with that, I'm opening it up for questions.
We've got a few minutes for questions. Anyone have one? Okay, I'm going to start here.
Hi, thank you very much for your lecture. I just want a quick question on the second last point you mentioned about doing a SWOT analysis on each of the 9 components. Could you just give a brief example of how is that thought process is? Maybe using the component of like a value proposition.
So on the value proposition, for example, you can, if you are using the some of the components or some of the questions that Osterwalder and Pinero put in their books, you can augment them, but some of the questions in there would be on the value proposition. They want you to rank and make 2 statements, rank it at a +5 or a -5. So if you're really locked on, in other words, customers really have articulated the problem, and you feel that the value proposition is very strong. In other words, you've got a raft of people that are coming in, and you have to make very few changes to your product. That's probably an indication that your value proposition is strong. If you find yourself, every customer that comes in is asking for a different feature onto your product or a different way and a different price and whatnot, then your value proposition probably isn't that strong. You probably haven't clarified or created a nug which gives you a repeatable process. And so you would score it on the negative side. So there's a +-, and then we also have a series of questions in there which evaluate opportunities to improve. And so you can look at the opportunities to improve, and then threats. Threats would be often external things, such as competition is very close. We're not well differentiated between ourselves and the competition. And so if you go through those, I think you can create a fairly honest perspective. And you know, one of the nice things about it is it's not just kind of picking numbers from the air. It's a structured way of going through and looking at the value proposition, the channels, the customer relationships. And again, I would encourage you to develop a couple of questions that are unique to your business, that help you gain insight to your business. Okay?
Kirk, Greg Fowler, Hypotheses Medical. I spoke to you earlier, so this isn't a complete sandbag, but I am going to be a bit of a contrarian. I found that the business model canvas is a wonderful tool as that umbrella, especially around the core value propositions and some of the fundamental assumptions that underlie your business that you do want to examine every 90 days. But the jump from there immediately into pro forma, I feel overlooks what I view as a mission critical part, which is a segmented and non-numerical quarterly milestones broken out carefully. And the what is kind of what you described, and then the how is that, and then you jump to the numbers. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so I said that I use this on a quarterly basis with businesses. It is not a business plan. It is not a financial pro forma. It is a business model. And so you have to create a plan which is a combination of strategy and execution. I frequently use what's called the one-page plan developed by Vern Harnish. And if you get his book, Scaling Up, talking about running high-growth companies and enjoying the ride, it's an excellent tool. And so the business model canvas is something which feeds into that in terms of helping you understand what are the key initiatives that you have to undertake this quarter, this year, and the next 5 years to help you get to your big, hairy, audacious goal. So it is only one tool. It's not to replace a business plan. It's just to help you strengthen and look at the key components. And these are the most critical components to your business. Again, for technology entrepreneurs, which many of us in the New Ventures BC competition are, it gets us away from the technology and away from the numbers and thinking about actually how a business works. What is the structure of a business and how important the customer side of the business is, understanding the segments, understanding the value proposition to each one of those segments, and how you're delivering to them in terms of selling to them and how you're supporting them. It is also not a market analysis or an industry analysis. So these are other things that you need to look at. And looking at the business model canvas without looking at the market, the general industry, can obviously lead you very far astray because you're always operating in context with something else or some competitor that's in the marketplace. And so, again, I think the Business Model Canvas book does a good job of understanding or showing you that you do need to look at market forces and environmental factors, et cetera, that are out in the marketplace, and that your business model has to be in that context. Okay? So totally agree that you've got to look at the bigger picture. You've got to dig down, dig deeper, come up with actions, if you will, which I usually draw from the one-page plan. It's a nice, concise way of putting down some numbers as well as strategies of what has to be worked on.
All right.
Any other questions?
So last year, this was a 2.5-hour workshop, and Kirk didn't even blink an eye when I said, I need you to do it in an hour and 10 minutes. So thank you. Thank you, Kirk.
You're welcome.